I still remember the first time it happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, bright, sticky, and loud, the kind of day where laughter from the backyard feels like it could carry for miles. I was standing by the kitchen window, wiping down the counters, when I heard her voice. Samantha, my daughter-in-law. She was outside with two of her friends, women who looked like they'd stepped right out of a lifestyle magazine. Glossy hair, white sandals, laughter like polished glass. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could hear every word through the open patio door. Oh, that's just Maria. She helps me keep the place tidy. She said it so casually, so effortlessly, as if I weren't her husband's mother, but her maid. For a second, I thought maybe I'd heard wrong. The clatter of dishes, the chirp of cicadas, maybe they twisted her words. But then one of her friends laughed and said, "You're so lucky, Sam. I wish my cleaning lady were that dedicated." And Samantha, my Samantha, just giggled. Yeah, she's been with us for a while now. Very loyal. I froze. My hand still smelled faintly of lemon detergent, and the rag I was holding dripped water down my wrist. My knees went weak, but I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at her reflection in the glass, the woman who called me mom in private, who hugged me at family dinners, who insisted she loved having me around. And yet here she was, telling her friends I was the help. Now, before I take you deeper into that day, I should tell you how I ended up there in the first place. After my husband, Richard, passed away, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every corner held an echo of him, his reading glasses on the end table, his mug on the counter, his laugh still somewhere in the walls. I tried to stay, but loneliness has a way of swallowing a person whole. So when my son, David, and Samantha invited me to move in with them, I said yes. I thought it would be good, a fresh start, a full house again. They had just bought a beautiful home in the suburbs, white fences, manicured lawns, and neighbors who waved a little too eagerly. Samantha had a good job in marketing, and David ran a small construction company. They were busy, but happy. At least, that's what I believe. The first few months were fine. I helped around the house, laundry, cooking, keeping things tidy. Not because they asked, but because I wanted to. That's what mothers do. We give, even when no one's keeping score. Samantha always smiled, thanked me for dinner, told me how helpful I was. I didn't see the small things then, how she'd correct her friends when they called me your mother-in-law, saying, "Oh, Maria just lives with us now." Or how she'd insist I wear plain clothes when guests came over. Just something simple. You don't need to dress up. At the time, I thought she was being kind. Thought she wanted me to feel comfortable. But that afternoon, when she called me her maid, everything clicked into place. I didn't confront her right away. No. I kept wiping the counter like nothing happened. Because that's what we do when we're hurt. We keep our hands busy so our hearts don't shatter. When her friends left, she came back inside, humming, all smiles. "Oh, Mom, you didn't have to clean up," she said, taking off her sunglasses. I just smiled. "It's all right, dear. I don't mind." But inside, something broke, quietly, like a thread snapping. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. The sunlight fell across the photo on my nightstand, the one of me, David, and Richard, taken years ago at the beach. Richard's arm around my shoulder. David, barely 20 then, grinning wide. They used to say I was the glue that held the family together. And now, I was a servant in my own son's home. That night, at dinner, I couldn't taste a thing. Samantha was talking about a new client, and David was nodding, distracted by his phone. I looked at him, my boy, and I wondered, did he know? Did she tell him too that I was just a help? When I cleared the plates, Samantha smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, Mom, you're such a lifesaver. You always make things easier." Easier. That word sat heavy in my chest. Easier for her. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay awake, listening to the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the stairs, and thinking about all the times I defended her. The times I told my friends, Samantha's like a daughter to me. I thought about the way she'd flinch whenever her friends mentioned their mothers-in-law. How she'd joke that she was lucky I wasn't one of those controlling types. And I realized she didn't want a mother-in-law. She wanted help. She wanted control. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet, because I wanted to see just how far she'd go. So I played along. The next morning, when Samantha asked if I could tidy up the guest room before her book club arrived, I smiled and said, "Of course." I polished the table. I set out cookies. I wore my plain blue cardigan, the one she said looked neat. When her friends came in, I heard her say it again. "That's Maria. She helps around the house." And I smiled, just like a good maid would, because sometimes the best revenge starts with silence. Over the next few weeks, I watched her carefully. Not with anger, at least not the kind that burns and destroys, but with the quiet, cold kind, the kind that waits. Samantha had a pattern. Every time her friends came over, I became invisible. She'd switch from her soft, polite tone to that sugary, performative voice she saved for her social circle. "Oh, you know how hard it is keeping this place in order," she'd say, glancing toward me like I was part of the furniture. Her friends would nod sympathetically, and one of them once whispered, "You're so lucky to have her, Sam. I can barely trust my cleaning lady to fold towels right." And Samantha laughed and said, "Oh, I trained her myself." That one hurt the most. It wasn't about the words. It was about the way she said them, like I was a thing she owned. I started noticing other things, too. She'd make little comments when David wasn't around, like, "Mom, could you please not sit in the living room when I have guests? It just looks cluttered." Or, "Mom, maybe you should eat in the kitchen tonight. The girls and I are having wine and tapas. It's not really your kind of evening." anything. I'd nod, smile, pretend not to mind, but every word sank deep like stones thrown into a lake. Then one afternoon, I went to deliver some laundry to their bedroom. I always knocked first, but no one answered, so I gently pushed the door open. Her phone was buzzing on the dresser, screen lighting up with a new message. I didn't mean to look, truly I didn't, but the message preview caught my eye before I could turn away. Group chat, Saturday brunch crew Samantha. Can't wait to show you girls the new decor. Maria's been working all morning. She's slow, but she gets things done eventually. I stood there for a long time, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound in the room. Slow, but she gets things done eventually. That's what she thought of me. Not mom, not family, just a slow, aging maid. My throat went dry, and for the first time in years, I felt truly small. Like all the years I'd spent raising her husband, loving their family, cooking their meals, none of it mattered. I left her room quietly and closed the door. That night, I sat by my window, hands folded in my lap, and I asked myself, why am I letting her do this to me? The answer came softly, because you love your son. A few days later, David came home early. I decided to test the waters. David, I asked, as he dropped his keys on the counter, do you ever feel like Samantha doesn't want me around? He looked up, confused. What? No. Mom, of course not. Why would you say that? I smiled faintly. Oh, nothing. Just sometimes she seems distant. He shrugged. She's been stressed with work. You know how she gets. Don't overthink it. That's what sons do. They defend their wives without realizing the cracks forming in between. But I didn't push. I just nodded, quietly stirring my tea. And that's when I made my decision. If Samantha wanted to treat me like her maid, I'd be the best maid she ever had. Not out of obedience, but out of strategy. Because eventually, masks slipped. The next weekend, Samantha hosted another gathering, this one bigger, louder, filled with women from her office. I could hear them before I saw them, the sharp clinking of glasses, perfume thick in the air, laughter that echoed off the high ceilings. Samantha walked into the kitchen, smiling that perfect, camera-ready smile. Maria, she said softly, could you bring out the charcuterie board? And maybe stay in the kitchen afterward? I'll call you if we need anything. Of course, I replied, matching her tone perfectly. I brought the platter out, arranged just right. As I placed it on the table, one of her coworkers said, oh, you're so lucky to have live-in help, Sam. I don't know how you manage it all. And Samantha, with that same calm sweetness, replied, oh, I just make sure she's happy. You know, keep her busy. She needs the structure. She needs the structure. The room laughed lightly. I didn't. I caught her eye for half a second. She looked away. That's when I knew. She wasn't just embarrassed of me. She was ashamed to be connected to me. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It came in layers, like the peeling of wallpaper, each strip revealing something uglier underneath. And then came the night that changed everything. David had been away on a business trip, and Samantha decided to host a small girls' night. She asked me to prepare a few snacks and then give them some space. I did as she asked. I stayed in my room mostly, but when I went to the kitchen for water later, I heard them laughing again. She's still here, one of them whispered. Yes, Samantha replied. She insists on staying. I can't exactly kick her out. She's family. Oh, that's tough, another woman said. I could never live with my mother-in-law. Samantha sighed dramatically. Tell me about it. It's like having a housekeeper who judges you for everything. But I just smile and let her help. It keeps her busy. The women laughed, and I stood there in the hallway, holding my glass, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That was the moment, the final confirmation. All the kindness she'd shown me was a performance. Every thank you, every mom, every I appreciate you, all of it was a script she read when my son was home. When he wasn't, I was nothing. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you power. Because while Samantha thought I was just her silent, obedient helper, I was already planning how to make her truth public. That night, I didn't cry. Not once. Instead, I opened my notebook, the one I used to jot down recipes, and started writing. Dates, times, words she'd said. A quiet, detailed record of every moment she'd made me invisible. Because if she wanted to play this game, I was going to play it better. It took me years to learn that silence can be more powerful than words. When you stop reacting, people start showing you who they really are. And Samantha, well, she showed me everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched as she dug her own grave, one little lie at a time. She'd tell David how grateful she was that I helped her. Then, behind his back, she'd tell her friends I was the housekeeper who came with a house. She said that once, came with a house. I almost laughed when I overheard it. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe how low she'd gone. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet, because confrontation only matters when there's an audience. One afternoon, while cleaning the dining area, I noticed Samantha's laptop open on the counter. She'd gone upstairs to take a call. Her inbox was still visible, and I saw a subject line that made my stomach twist. Subject: weekend photos for the office newsletter. Curiosity pulled me closer. It was an email chain between her and her team. She'd attached photos from her last house gathering, the one where I'd served food and smiled quietly in the background. There I was, in 3 of them, standing by the kitchen door holding a tray, and the caption beneath the photo read, couldn't do it without my amazing helper, Maria. Helper. That word echoed in my chest like a slap. I scrolled down. The replies were full of praise. You're so down to earth, Sam. Love that you treat your staff so kindly. Your goals. I stood there, staring at that glowing screen, my reflection faint in the laptop glass. Something inside inside me hardened. I'd been patient, kind, dignified, but enough was enough. That evening, when David came home, I asked him to sit with me. "David," I said gently, "have you seen any photos from Samantha's gatherings lately?" He looked up from his phone, puzzled. "Photos? No, why?" I hesitated, because I wasn't trying to destroy his marriage. I just wanted him to see the truth. "Would you mind asking her about them?" I said softly. "Maybe you'll understand what I mean." He frowned. "Mom, is something going on?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say your wife is very talented at storytelling." He didn't understand then, but I knew he would soon. 2 days later, Samantha called for me from the kitchen. "Maria, could you come here for a sec?" She only called me Mom when David was around. That day, he wasn't. "Yes," I asked. She stood by the counter, arms folded, a tight smile on her lips. "Did you tell David about the brunch photos?" I froze, so he'd already asked her. I tilted my head slightly. "He mentioned something, yes." Her voice dropped, low, tense. "Why would you do that? Those pictures were for work." "Work," I repeated calmly. "Where you told people I was your housekeeper." Her mouth tightened. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Maria. It's just easier that way. My colleagues don't need to know about family dynamics. It keeps things professional." "Professional," I echoed, almost whispering. "And what am I exactly?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "I didn't mean anything by it. You're overreacting." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "No, dear, you're just underfeeling." Her eyes flickered, and that's when I realized something. She wasn't guilty. She was annoyed, not because she'd hurt me, but because I caught her. "I think it's best," she said coldly, "if you stop involving yourself in my affairs. I appreciate what you do, but you need to remember your place in this house." I looked her straight in the eye. "My place? Yes," she snapped. "You live here rent-free. You cook, you clean, you help. But don't forget, this is our home, not yours." For a long moment, I said nothing. Just let her words hang there. Then I nodded slowly. "You're right, Samantha," I said softly. "It's your home." And I walked away. But in that moment, my plan, my quiet, patient plan, became crystal clear. The next morning, David left early for a site meeting. Samantha had her book club over again. I served tea, smiling, polite as ever. But this time, I recorded everything. Not with a camera, with my phone's voice recorder tucked neatly into my apron pocket. I captured her laughter, her casual lies, her exact words. "She's like family, sure, but not really. She's just part of the routine now." Her friends laughed, and she added, "Oh, please, she doesn't even notice. She's old. She likes feeling useful." That one hurt, but I stayed silent, head bowed. That evening, David came home. Samantha greeted him with a kiss and a sweet smile, as though nothing in the world could be wrong. But after dinner, I asked if we could all talk. "Of course," David said, pulling out a chair. Samantha sat across from me, still smiling that perfect smile. "What's this about?" she asked lightly. I placed my phone on the table, pressed play, and let the recording speak for me. The laughter, the lies, the words, "She's old. She likes feeling useful." The silence that followed was deafening. David's face went pale. He looked at her, then at me, then back at her again. "Samantha," he said quietly, "what is this?" She stammered. It's taken out of context. "I was just joking, David. You know how women talk." "No," he interrupted, his voice low. "I know how you talk." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me, eyes wide, pleading now. "Maria, please, you have to tell him." I raised a hand gently. "No, Samantha. For once, I think it's time you tell the truth yourself." David stood, shaking his head. "You made my mother your maid, and you lied about her to everyone." Samantha's voice broke. "It wasn't like that. People at work, they..." But he didn't let her finish. He left the room, walked straight upstairs, and closed the door. The echo of it carried through the house like thunder. Samantha stood there, frozen. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me, because sometimes tears don't mean remorse. They mean panic. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "Why did you record me?" I looked at her, calm, steady. "Because, dear, you already wrote the story. I just gave it a voice." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. Because for the first time since I'd moved in, I wasn't the quiet, helpful Maria. I was a woman reclaiming her dignity, one truth at a time. That night, I sat by the window again, the same way I had weeks before. But this time, there was no ache in my chest. Just peace. Cold, clean peace. The storm had begun, and I wasn't afraid of what would come next. For the next few days, the house went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that hums beneath the skin. Heavy, intense. David barely spoke. He went to work early, came home late, and when he did, he avoided Samantha completely. I could hear the distance in every creak of the stairs, every untouched dinner plate. Samantha tried to carry on like nothing had happened. She'd still hum while cleaning, still put on perfume before he came home. But I saw it, the trembling hands, the sleepless eyes, the faint desperation behind her smile. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can build their entire world on appearances, and yet one truth can bring it all crashing down. 3 days after the confrontation, David knocked on my door. It was late, almost midnight. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping in. His eyes were tired. "I need to ask you something." I nodded, waiting. Was it really that bad? Everything she said, everything she did? I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to choose my words carefully. "Yes," I said finally. "But what hurts more than what she said is that she believed it, that she thought treating me that way was normal." He sat down beside me on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. "I had no idea. I thought you two were fine." "You weren't supposed to," I said softly. That's the thing about pride. It keeps people like her smiling, even while they're lying. He nodded slowly, rubbing his face. I don't know what to do, he admitted. She's begging me to forgive her, but every time I look at her, I hear that recording. I placed my hand over his. You don't have to decide right now, David. Just don't rush to fix what's broken. Some things need to stay cracked for a while so the light can come through. He smiled faintly, the kind of small, grateful smile that reminded me of when he was a boy. Lost, hurt, but still good at heart. Thank you, Mom, he said quietly. That night, after he left my room, I finally allowed myself to exhale. The next morning, Samantha was already in the kitchen, sitting at the table, her face pale and makeup-free. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but spiritually. Maria, she began softly. Her voice trembled. Can we talk? I poured myself some coffee, took a slow sip and nodded. Go ahead. She clasped her hands tightly. I don't know what to say except that I'm sorry. I said nothing. I didn't mean to hurt you, she continued, eyes listening. I care too much about what people think. I wanted to fit in. I didn't realize how cruel I sounded until I heard myself on that recording. I leaned back, studying her face. There was no performance this time, just shame. Real, unpolished shame. Samantha, I said gently, I've been called many things in my life. Poor, old-fashioned, stubborn, but never invisible. You made me invisible in my own son's home. Tears slid down her cheeks. I know, and I hate myself for it. I sighed. You don't need to hate yourself. You just need to learn from it. Her eyes lifted, hesitant. Do you think David will ever forgive me? I paused before answering. Maybe. But forgiveness isn't something you ask for once. It's something you earn every day. Later that week, David and Samantha went to counseling. He told me about it afterward, how she cried through the session, how she admitted she'd been jealous. Jealous of what, I wondered? The therapist had asked her the same question, and she said, of how much he loves her. I wanted to be the only woman he looked up to. I didn't realize I was competing with someone who raised him. When David told me that, I didn't know whether to cry or pity her. Because jealousy, when left unchecked, becomes cruelty. The weeks turned into months. Samantha stopped hosting parties. She stopped gossiping about appearances. And for the first time since I'd moved in, she started spending time with me, real time. One morning, she came into the kitchen holding a small notebook. I've been writing things down, she said shyly. Things I've learned from you, like how you fold the laundry so neatly, or how you always start dinner with a prayer, even if it's just the two of us. I looked up surprised. Why? She smiled weakly. Because I want to remember the parts of you I never paid attention to. Something in me softened, not because I trusted her completely again, but because I could see the effort, the kind that comes from guilt and growth. By spring, the tension in the house had begun to lift. Samantha started volunteering at a local senior center. She said it made her realize how much she'd taken me for granted. One evening, as we sat at the table together, she said, you know, they all remind me of you, the way they tell stories, the way they smile even when they're lonely. I chuckled. Careful, dear. You'll start liking old people. She smiled. I already do. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. A few months later, she hosted another gathering, her first since the incident. But this time, she came to me beforehand. Mom, she said, emphasizing the word, I'd really like you to join us tonight. Not to serve, to sit with me. I studied her face. She meant it, so I agreed. That evening, as her friends arrived, Samantha introduced me properly. This is my mother-in-law, Maria, she said proudly. She's the reason this home feels like home. The room fell quiet for a moment. Then one of the women smiled and said, we've heard so much about you. She talks about your cooking all the time. I laughed softly. I hope she tells the truth now. Everyone chuckled, and Samantha squeezed my hand under the table. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, hers and mine. Time, as it does, softened the sharp edges. David and Samantha worked through their struggles. I found peace in small routines again. Morning tea, tending the garden, writing letters to old friends. Sometimes I'd catch Samantha watching me from across the room, not with pity, not with guilt, but with quiet respect. And that was enough. One evening, months later, we sat together watching the sunset from the porch. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the air warm and still. She turned to me and said, you know, Maria, I used to think being respected meant being admired, but now I think it means being kind, especially when no one's watching. I smiled. That's a good lesson to learn. She nodded, and I learned it from you. We sat in silence after that, two women bound not by blood or friendship, but by the lessons born from hurt. If I've learned anything from all this, it's that kindness without boundaries becomes servitude, and love without respect becomes pain. I don't regret moving in with them, because sometimes the people who break your heart are the same ones who teach you how strong it really is. And as for Samantha, she's not the same woman she was that day on the patio. Neither am I. We both learned that dignity can't be taken from you. You either give it away, or you guard it fiercely. I guard mine now. Every day. Gentle reflection to audience. Have you ever stayed silent to keep peace, only to realize that silence cost you your self-respect? Tell me, dear listener, when would you choose to speak up, and when would you simply play along until the truth reveals itself? For 2 whole days, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that smug smile she wore when her friends laughed at my expense. It wasn't even the lie that stung the most. It was the ease with which she told it, as if I'd never been anything more than someone who folded her laundry and scrubbed her floors. I remember standing standing in the kitchen that Monday morning, staring at the stack of plates I'd just washed. My hands were still wet, soap bubbles sliding down my wrists, when a thought struck me like lightning. If she wanted a maid, I'd give her one. I smiled. Not the soft, forgiving smile I was known for, but the quiet, knowing kind that comes when a woman has made up her mind. That evening, when her husband, Ryan, came home, I served dinner quietly. I didn't sit at the table like I used to. I stood by the counter, napkin folded neatly in my hands, and waited for her cue. "Mom, you don't have to stand," Ryan said, frowning a little. "Oh, it's all right," I said, in the sweetest tone I could muster. "I'm the help, remember?" You could have heard a pin drop. Lydia froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Her friends' voices from that brunch must have been echoing in her head, because her expression flickered from confusion to embarrassment to anger, all in the span of a few seconds. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Ryan asked, looking from her to me. Lydia forced a laugh, too high-pitched to sound real. "She's joking. My mom's always been dramatic." "Of course," I said softly. "That must be why you told your friends I was your maid. Drama runs in the family." Ryan's face drained of color. He looked at Lydia, searching for some kind of explanation, but she couldn't meet his eyes. I didn't push it further. Not yet. I simply gathered the plates and walked back to the kitchen like nothing had happened. That night, I decided to stop waiting for apologies that would never come. If Lydia wanted to pretend I was her maid, I would play their role perfectly, so well that it would expose the truth without a single word from me. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, tied my hair into a bun, and put on an old apron. When Lydia came downstairs, I was already sweeping. She gave me a wary glance. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Cleaning," I said with a shrug. "You don't want your maid slacking, do you?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't respond. From that moment on, I acted the part. I greeted her friends with a polite smile whenever they came by. "Would you like tea, ma'am?" I'd say sweetly, "Miss Lydia likes it with lemon and honey." They'd giggle awkwardly, glancing between us, unsure what to make of it. Lydia would squirm in her chair, cheeks burning, too proud to admit her lie. I started labeling my things in the guest room, maid's quarters, just loud enough for her to hear. I even started carrying a little notebook where I'd write house tasks like dust shelves before 10 a.m., wash Lydia's car, make dinner for Mr. Ryan and the children. It was petty, maybe, but sometimes poetic justice has to start small. By the third week, the tension in the house was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ryan had noticed everything. He wasn't a fool. He watched Lydia fumble over explanations, dodge questions, and grow snappy whenever I was around. One night, he finally confronted her. I overheard them in the living room, voices muffled but sharp enough to make out. "Why is my mother acting like your maid, Lydia? What did you say to her?" "I didn't say anything. She's just being overdramatic again." "Overdramatic?" Ryan's tone hardened. "She's washing your car at 7 in the morning. Maybe she likes helping. Helping doesn't mean humiliating herself." I slipped upstairs quietly, my heart both heavy and relieved. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was acknowledgement. For someone to see me, to see what I'd been reduced to. The next morning, Ryan asked me to have coffee with him before work. We sat at the dining table, the same table where Lydia had once introduced me as her maid. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle. "What's going on?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Ask your wife." "I have. She says it's all a misunderstanding." I smiled faintly. "Then I suppose it's one she's enjoyed quite a bit." He frowned, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what's happening between you two, but I hate seeing you like this. You don't deserve it." I reached across the table, touched his hand. "Thank you, sweetheart. But sometimes, people need to see the truth in their own mirror. Words won't teach them, consequences will." And just like that, he understood. He didn't press further. But that evening, when Lydia's friends came over again, he stayed home. I'll never forget that day. The doorbell rang around 3 p.m. I opened it, smiling warmly at Lydia's two friends, the same ones who'd laughed that afternoon. "Come in, ma'am," I said softly. "Miss Lydia's expecting you." They stepped inside awkwardly. I guided them to the living room, offering tea and cookies, just like before. But this time, Ryan was sitting in the armchair, reading a newspaper. Lydia walked in, startled to see him. "Ryan, I thought you had meetings today." He folded his paper calmly. "They got canceled. I figured I'd see what my maid does during these fancy afternoons." The room fell silent. Her friend's eyes darted from me, still in my apron, to Ryan, then to Lydia, who looked pale as chalk. I never," she stammered. "Oh, but you did," Ryan said quietly. "You told them she was your maid, didn't you?" One of the women shifted uncomfortably. "Lydia, we thought it was a joke." Lydia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, I felt a small pang of pity. Not enough to forgive her, but enough to see her as human again. I took off my apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the coffee table. Then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "You see, the thing about lies, dear, is that they're like stains. You can hide them under fancy tablecloths for a while, but sooner or later, they bleed through." And with that, I walked out to the garden, leaving her to face the echo of her own deceit. It's strange how truth moves. You can whisper it in one quiet room, and before you know it, it's echoing through every hallway you've ever walked. That's exactly what happened after that afternoon. By the next week, people in our small community began to talk. Not loudly, no one dared to say it to her face, but softly, in those clipped little conversations that happen at the grocery store, the hair salon, or outside the church on Sunday mornings. "Did you hear what Lydia said about her mother-in-law? No, the one who raised Ryan. Apparently, she called her a maid in front of her friends. Can you imagine? I never joined those whispers. I didn't need to. Truth, once set free, doesn't need help spreading. Ryan tried to hold the house together. He still kissed Lydia goodbye before work, still tucked the kids into bed at night, but his voice had changed. Softer with the children, distant with her. And when he spoke to me, there was an ache in his tone that helpless ache sons carry when they realize the woman they married isn't the woman they thought she was. I never said I told you so. I didn't need to. Silence was enough. It's funny how silence can sound louder than shouting when guilt fills the room. One evening, I heard Lydia in the kitchen on the phone. Her voice cracked between sobs. I don't know what to do, Claire. Everyone's treating me like I'm some kind of monster. I made one stupid mistake. I paused by the hallway door, hand resting on the frame. There was something almost childlike in her tone, that desperate need to be forgiven without truly understanding what she'd done. I just wanted to fit in, she continued, voice trembling. They all have these perfect mothers-in-law, elegant, quiet, helpful. And mine was, well, she was always around. I felt judged, like I was never enough. For a moment, my heart softened, just a flicker, because I remembered what it felt like to be young and unsure, to measure yourself against everyone else and always come up short. But then I remembered the laughter, her friend's smirks, the sting of humiliation, and that flicker faded into a steady calm. A few days later, the school held a community fundraiser. Lydia was one of the organizers. She'd been planning it for months. It was supposed to be her moment to shine. I decided to go, not to gloat, but to stand in the same space where she had once hidden me. The event hall was decorated beautifully, twinkling fairy lights, tables of pastries and flowers, little name tags that read, "Support our school." Lydia moved around the room, trying her best to look composed, but I could see the strain behind her smile. When a few of the other mothers greeted me kindly, genuinely kindly, she froze. They asked about my recipes, complimented the jam I donated, even invited me to join their next bake sale. And Lydia, she just stood there, lips pressed tight, watching the scene unfold. For once, I wasn't the one she could hide. I was visible, seen, heard. At one point, her closest friend, Claire, the same one she called crying, leaned over and whispered to her, "You should apologize to her properly, Lydia. It's the right thing to do." I saw Lydia's throat tighten. She nodded weakly but didn't move. Sometimes, shame builds walls too thick for pride to climb over. The turning point came 2 weeks later. Ryan invited me and the kids to Sunday lunch. Lydia cooked, her way of making peace, I suppose. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, the kind of meal that smells like apology even before anyone says a word. We all sat at the table, the air thick with unspoken things. Ryan cleared his throat. "Before we eat, there's something Lydia wants to say." She looked up, eyes red-rimmed, fingers twisting a napkin in her lap. "Mom," she began quietly, "I've been awful to you. I lied about you for no reason other than my own pride. I told people things that weren't true, and I hurt you deeply. You didn't deserve that." I said nothing. I wanted to let her speak, not to interrupt the sound of her humility finding its way out. "I was ashamed," she continued, voice trembling. "Ashamed of myself. I thought if I made you smaller, I'd feel bigger. But all I did was make myself cruel." Tears filled her eyes. Even Ryan looked down, unable to watch his wife unravel. I reached for my glass of water, took a sip, and placed it down softly. "Lydia," I said, my voice steady, "you don't need to explain your reasons. You only need to understand the pain you caused, and make sure you never do that to anyone else again." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm sorry." I gave a small smile. "I know." And for the first time since that dreadful brunch, I meant it. After that day, things began to shift, slowly but genuinely. She started including me again, this time, not as a showpiece, not as someone to impress her friends, but as family. She'd ask for my advice with the children, let me cook beside her in the kitchen, and sometimes, when she was too tired to pretend, she'd simply sit near me in silence. That silence no longer felt cold. It felt like healing. The community eventually moved on to other gossip, as they always do. But those who'd seen the story unfold remembered the lesson. That pride, when left unchecked, can turn love into humiliation. And that's sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud, it's dignified. One afternoon, a few months later, Lydia came to my room. She stood by the door, hesitant, holding a framed photo, one of the whole family from that Sunday lunch. "I thought you might like to have this," she said softly. I took it from her hands. The picture was warm and imperfect, a little blurry, a little crooked, but real. "Thank you, dear," I whispered. As she turned to leave, she paused. "You know, I still can't believe how kind you were, after everything I did." I smiled gently. "Kindness isn't weakness, Lydia. It's strength wrapped in grace." She didn't reply, but I saw it in her eyes, that quiet understanding only born from remorse. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges of pain. Months passed, and the house began to breathe again. The air no longer carried tension. It smelled of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings and the faint sweetness of lavender detergent after laundry day. Lydia and I still had our silences, but they were no longer walls, just quiet pauses between two people learning how to live gently around each other. Some afternoons, she'd sit beside me on the porch while the children played in the yard. She'd bring 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for her, and we'd watch the sun dip behind the fence, painting everything gold. Once she whispered, "You know, I used to think respect had to be earned earned through perfection. But you taught me it's given through humility. I didn't answer. I simply reached for her hand and squeezed it. That was enough. There's a strange kind of peace that comes after heartbreak. It doesn't arrive all at once. It drips in slowly, like sunlight through the blinds after a storm. One morning, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The hurt had stopped feeling raw. It had turned into a story, one that no longer burned, only taught. Ryan noticed the change first. "You seem lighter, Mom," he said one evening as he hugged me goodbye. I smiled. "That's what forgiveness does, son. It unpacks your heart." He nodded, eyes misty. "You're the strongest person I know." I wanted to tell him that strength doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like washing another woman's dishes while she calls you her maid, and still choosing to rise above it. When Lydia's birthday came that fall, I baked her favorite cake, chocolate with raspberry filling. The kids decorated the kitchen with paper streamers. Ryan played an old record on the stereo. When it was time for candles, Lydia looked at me and said softly, "Will you cut a cake, Mom?" That one word, Mom, said more than any apology ever could. As I sliced the first piece, I felt tears prick my eyes. Not the sad kind, the grateful kind, because sometimes life doesn't give you the ending you expect. It gives you the one you've earned. A few weeks later, I decided to move into my own little cottage across town. It wasn't far, a 20-minute drive, close enough for Sunday dinners and school recitals, but it gave me space to breathe. Lydia helped me pack. We folded linens together, labeled boxes, and laughed over old memories. When the last box was loaded into the truck, she hugged me tightly, longer than she ever had before. "I'll never forget what you did for me," she whispered. "You could have exposed me, humiliated me, but instead, you let me see myself." I smiled against her shoulder. "That's what mothers do, dear. We don't break our children's mirrors. We help them see their reflection clearly." My new home was small, quiet, and filled with sunlight. Every morning I'd open the curtains, make a pot of coffee, and sit by the window with my journal. Sometimes I'd write letters I never planned to send, to my younger self, to Lydia, to the woman I used to be before the pain. In one of those letters I wrote, "There's dignity in kindness, even when others mistake it for weakness. There's power in silence, even when others think you have no voice. And there's peace in forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because you do." Life went on. The children grew taller, the seasons changed, and with each passing day, the memory of that brunch, that cruel laughter, became softer, smaller, almost tender, because it was no longer a wound. It was a lesson. And in some strange, merciful way, Lydia and I became closer than we'd ever been. Not because she was perfect, but because she wasn't. Because she had fallen, and I had chosen to reach instead of turn away. I often think back to that first day, the moment I decided to play along. It was never about revenge. It was about reflection, about holding up a mirror to someone who couldn't see the love standing right in front of her. And when she finally did, the woman she became was worth all the heartbreak it took to get there. Maybe you've been in my place before, standing quietly in someone else's shadow, your worth hidden behind their pride. If that's you, I want you to remember this. You don't have to scream to prove your value. You don't have to fight to be seen. Sometimes, all you have to do is stand in your truth, gently, patiently, and let time do the revealing. Because people may lie about who you are, but eventually, truth will speak in its own clear, steady voice. And when it does, you won't need to say a single word. So tell me, my dear, have you ever had to let the truth reveal itself for you?